video describing my attempt at creating assessments for a Harkness discussion that are not assessing discussion as a skill. And the reason that I have done this is that particularly when I started working with 10th and 11th graders, they made it clear to me that they believed that assessing discussion harmed the quality of the discussion. And as part of my role in year, I was given the ability to form a Harkness leadership course, which was a group of 11, 10 through 12th graders. And we had a course that was completely taught in the Harkness method, meaning we were either essentially training on facilitation skills, preparing for a discussion, or having discussion itself. And one of the things I was able to do, since this class was experimental, was experiment with ways to use discussion and take assessment from it, but not assess the discussion itself, which is not something that's being practiced widely at CVU, though it is something that I will advocate for and experiment with myself in my classes going forward. So the documents in this section just give examples of that. And I should say before I go into this that this is to some degree my pet project. There's a handful of other folks at CVU who have Harkness discussion who agree with this adventure, I should say, this experiment, but not everybody does, and you don't have to either. I've included it here because I would be remiss to not present it as one lens to think about assessing discussion. And one of the reasons that I do think a lot about it, and I am going to begin to phase out discussion, and this is really important, is that really it's just humanities. And I suppose art could do this as well. But in practice, right now, it is only humanities who is having students sit in a circle and assessing discussion. Harkness discussion is happening outside of humanities, for example, in math and science, but it's happening in small groups. Now, those teachers cannot assess discussion. They can't, in a meaningful way, be with all of the 4 or 5 or 6 small groups in their class and provide every single student a score for discussion. It's just not possible. So are we really saying that the onus and the authority to assess discussion is only something that's available to humanities teachers? That doesn't sit right with me at all. And that's just one of my issues with it. So that's just sort of setting the context for why I have developed the documents that I'm about to go over. So the first one is an example of a scale, and it is using CVU's analysis skill, which is typically a skill that we assess through longer form writing at shortest paragraphs, longest, multiple page essays. And what I've experimented with is assessing analysis using the prep sheet. So I need to see these things right here in the what does this look like section on students' prep sheets in order to give them a score. Now, what this means is that you have to be, as the teacher, you have to be really thoughtful about what you're asking on your prep. You need to provide students the opportunity to demonstrate these skills on your prep sheets. Thus far, and it's still in its infancy, this has felt pretty good to me and a really meaningful use of prep sheets. Is this the only skill you could assess on prep sheets? No, absolutely not. This is just my introductory foray into this. Next, this is a way of providing summative scores that I've tried, and this is similar to a holistic model that Harwood has used. So what I have said to my students from the jump is that there is no summative in the skill of discussion, in the skill of relationships, or the skill of analysis. And I should say that for the first several Harkness discussions, I did assess discussion. And I used a scale that is actually from the last section. But what I said to students about midway through the class is, do you feel good about your score in discussion right now? If so, if you promise to continue to bring your A game and be sincere and commit yourself to high quality Harkness discussion, I will not change your score. I'll leave your discussion score the way it is. And they essentially signed that agreement with me, not literally, and they've honored it. But before I did that, so what I was doing is every discussion was formative. I took a formative score from the discussion itself. I assessed the relationship skill from reflection journals that I'll show you shortly, and I assessed analysis from their prep sheets. So from each discussion, I was getting a formative discussion score, relationship score, and analysis score. And after a certain number of those, I think it was something like 5, what I did is I just created this document for each student. I pasted it on, or I put it on Google Classroom as an assignment so that every student had a copy. I put in a score for each of these skills that was certainly not averaged. I don't believe in that at all. Basically what it was demonstrative of a trend. Could they demonstrate either consistency at a certain level, or were they trending up? Or were they trending down? Is it a perfect science? No. But I think that if we try to be too objective, we squeeze some of the reality, some of the authenticity out of discussion, because the reality of discussion is that as much as we want to make it objective, it isn't. It is a fluid thing. And it's hard to apply objectivity to a fluid thing. So what I did is I used that formula that I just described. I provided a score, and I gave a justification in the comments column as to why they got that score. I then turned it into them, and they could reply by either saying, yes, we agree, or no, we disagree, and here is why. But they needed to justify that by looking back over their formative scores and their reflection journals. So this is something I'm going to continue to use. It is it is work. It is time to provide all these comments, but I do think it honors the nuance of using discussion as an assessment tool. So I mentioned journals. So here's a journal I used in this leadership class, or a reflection journal rather. So after every discussion, that very night, the student's homework is to go and complete this journal. So I have this prompt, and I use this prompt to assess the relationship scale. Here is what does this look like? So this is my benchmark list for how to assess relationships based on their reflection of the discussion. Next, I have a spot for them to reflect on the discussion, and I use it to assess the perspective scale. Here is my benchmark list for perspectives. They go in and they write. So, is there room to grow in this model? I'm sure that there is. Thus far, I have found it successful. I can sleep well at night, and I know that there is meaningful learning happening in the discussion by what I collect in these prep sheets. And I want to show you one of these prep sheets just so you can have a sense of how I set them up for analysis and for perspective. So I'm providing an opportunity to ask probing questions. That's part of my analysis scale. They have to justify the use of text right here. This is part of what I'm using for my analysis scale. And then I have a content-based analytical question. For perspectives, I've given them space. And again, this is all on, they're going to do this by hand. There are no computers open when I'm having a discussion. I've given them space to add in something that someone said that challenged them or expanded their thinking about the topic. And it's the material that they're writing in this table that I'm using to assess perspectives.